Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Financial Algebra with me, Miss Passmore. Today, we're going to finish up section 11.4, which is cash flow and budgeting. Let me hide this little guy. We have a few things to compare today and to expand upon since we last met, which we just basically created spreadsheets and determined cash flow analysis for people. So, there's me. Yo, what's good? And let's pop right into it, shall we? Okay, so we figured out how to do cash flow analysis and create a basic spreadsheet. So now, how are we going to create, use, and modify a budget? So once we've done the cash flow analysis, it's time to convert what we've learned into a working budget, which is where things can start to get a little bit more complex depending upon your financial situation, of course. So budgets are personalized, thorough lists and compilations of all of your financial obligations and all like a flow of how your money is coming in and going out and how you can dispense that evenly, right? So it depends personally on where you're at in terms of your income, in terms of your bills, things like that. So complexity can vary from person to person. Obviously, you guys are high school seniors, your budget is going to be completely different than my budget as an adult, right? Even my budget is completely different than my roommate's budget because she owns this home, right? Her budget is vastly different than our parents' budget because we're still young adults, whereas they're much older, much wiser, have much more things to accumulate, a lot more costs and things like that. And in comparison, even further than that, our parents have a much different budget than, say, I don't know, a celebrity or a movie star or, a famous actress or a singer or something like that, because they have much more income, therefore a lot more things to budget out, a lot more costs. So everything is personalized, but this is just like a nice little intro to that. So because we're just starting out, we can have a simple system such as the 50-30-20, which you guys read about and saw that 50% should go to your needs, 30% to your wants, 20% to your savings, or the envelope accounting system, which is brand new that you guys haven't heard of yet. So the envelope accounting system helps you manage your income with real dollars versus formulas, numbers, and charts. This is kind of in my opinion, kind of becoming a little bit more obsolete, just in the fact that most of us are all digital now. So I highly anticipate that many of you do not have just cash lying around. It's in your bank account, it's on your debit card, right? So the envelope system is where you actually take all of your money out and you place them into envelopes based on your particular budget. So instead of having a formula, instead of having a chart to figure out your budget, you're just literally just taking your own money and putting them into specific envelopes, and that will help you stay within the budget. So the envelopes are organized to hold the amount for weekly or monthly budget categories. So you might have a category for like eating food for lunch, right? So say you put $20 in your lunch thing for the week. And once you've used up all of those $20, you can't do anything else. Or you realize you're getting close to it because you can physically see how much change you have left over from the week. You kind of start to make changes and understand like, oh shoot, I'm running through this money rather quickly. Or perhaps you did a great job and you have excess money left over in the envelope. You can make a change. You get to make a decision of what you'd like to do with that leftover money. This is great for people with few budgeting categories, aka y'all, college students, college-bound students, right? You're not going to have very many, very many financial obligations. You might, I don't know your situation, but perhaps you have your living expenses taken care of and you get a part-time job and you end up earning maybe $200 every 2 weeks. You're not really working a whole lot. So you have to be able to spread out that $200 over the additional costs that you have. So you might have an envelope for fuel. You might have an envelope for groceries. You might have an envelope for fun money, depending on things you have. But it's best if you have very few categories. So, like, ideally, you would want to have maybe 5 envelopes or less to do the envelope accounting system. Um, so here's an example. This isn't on the PowerPoint, but suppose you decide to budget $50 a week for dining out. This could include breakfast, lunch, dinner, even snacks or coffee runs. Anytime you pay for these things, you would take money out of that dining out envelope, kind of like I was saying earlier. And once the money runs out, you have to wait until the next money allocation period, the next time you would naturally refill them, maybe 2 weeks from now, in order um, to get more money for that. So you would not take it from other envelope areas. You have reached your budget. This is a really nice visual way, kinesthetic way for you to see that you're running out of your money for your budget. If there's money lying around after the end of the cycle, you can transfer it to another envelope where maybe funds are needed more. So maybe you realize that you didn't eat out as much as you thought you would. Maybe you only spent $30 in eating out for 2 weeks, which is relatively great. Maybe you're cooking a lot more at home. And then you realize that you needed more money for fuel, though. So you could take that $20 and put it in your fuel category, your gas category. Because maybe that needs more money. You tend to run out of that budget quicker, right? But yeah, college students might find this super advantageous, although the security of keeping money in college is kind of stressful, especially if you live in a dorm room or in a shared apartment with a stranger. You might want to save for something like that, just in case, because you never really know. You can never be more safe. But yeah, so obviously, more money, more problems, right? The more money you have coming in, the more expenses you're going to have. The complexity of your budget is going to increase, right? So I think Biggie said it best: the more money you have, more problems. And I'm sure you guys have heard that so many times. And it's easy to realize too, like, obviously a transition into adulthood is, college life or living on your own. And that comes with its own set of responsibilities. But then think about, like, leveling up from that. Maybe you become a homeowner. That's another level of adulthood where you need more money. You have more financial obligations. You have to cover, remember, all of the closing costs that we have. That doesn't include all of your additional utilities, all additional fees, turn on fees for your electric, gas, water. Like, they charge you to turn it on and things like that. So the more money you have, the more problems, the more financial obligations you have. And therefore, your budget is going to have to be more complex and have more categories to it as well. So, yeah, as your responsibilities grow, things get more complicated. You have a lot more to account for, a lot more to watch where your money's coming and going. And also, we tend to live within our means. So once we see that we're earning more money, we tend to spend more money. Just typically, it's not always the case, but something to keep in mind. So, as a public service announcement, when budgeting, whatever budget you decide to use, whatever kind of structure works best for you and your lifestyle, it's important that you are reviewing your budget often. You're reviewing it periodically. Perhaps you decide you want to review your budget twice a year. That's fine. Make sure you evaluate it in January and then in July. Or perhaps you want to evaluate your budget, quarterly. So every 3 months you're checking in on your budget. You set some time. But it's really, really important to check your budget so that you can make necessary adjustments should you need to. Otherwise, it's kind of pointless of setting up a budget other than kind of being more mindful of where your cash flow is going. Because the whole purpose of a budget is that we want to increase our savings. We want to save our money. We want to increase the amount that we are saving and decreasing our debts over time to become, like, financially responsible and, like I was saying, take control of our finances and be financially free. That's the goal is to make sure that we have more money and less debt so that we can increase our status and purchase more large items or plan for purchasing a home or have various financial goals. You want to make sure you're reducing those debts so that you're in a more eligible position, a more desirable contributor, and then lenders are going to be like, wow, look, this person has little debt, and that might even increase your chances of getting a home offer loan, mortgage loan, or anything like that, maybe even a car loan. um, so obviously we talked about this when we were discussing credit. Pay your bills on time, because there's late charges, people, and when you have late charges, that's more money that you didn't have to pay initially, so that's going to decrease your savings, and also makes you look bad in terms of lenders. So like, oh, so and so missed this month, or so and so missed this month, or whatever it happens to be. Keep accurate records of what you have going forth. So don't just kind of like, oh, I think that this is the amount. No, make sure that you're keeping accurate records of all of your bills. You're looking over, when we were talking about expenses, you're looking over that, making sure you're being charged correctly, making sure that you don't have any fees hidden in there, or like sometimes something I didn't realize until, I don't know, embarrassingly, like maybe 2 years ago, is that when you get auto insurance, you can choose to pay the premium for whatever length of time it is, usually 6 months or 1 year. You can pay that premium in full and not pay any interest, or if you choose to go the monthly route where you pay your auto insurance every month, they actually charge you insurance. So looking at those accurate records would be an opportunity for you to save money because you're actually not paying interest. Does that make sense? Additionally, the whole point of a budget is to set goals and then review them regularly. So say that you're in college and you have, just a nice commuter car. It works for now, but your goal once you finish college is to have enough money saved up to buy a newer car outright. So maybe that's your goal. Your goal is to start saving enough money for a vehicle once you graduate college, or maybe you notice that you need one a little bit earlier. So setting that goal, reviewing them, seeing how close you're getting to a goal, and making adjustments whenever necessary. So with that being said, let's start talking about different budgets and how we can actually see this help us achieve our financial goals. So this example says create a frequency budget plan for Dave and Joan. So we're going back to Dave and Joan using their cash flow analysis from example 1. So the last video we talked about example 1 and example 2. Example 1 specifically just had a bunch of their spreadsheets. They gave us a checkoff list, and we created a cash flow setup to see that they actually had a surplus of $110 per month left over, and they could figure out what they wanted to do with that money. But that was a good thing. They're managing their finances really, really well. They have more income coming in than expenses going out. So we want to create a frequency budget so that we can better visualize like how often these expenses are occurring. So that's our goal. Underline it in yellow again. Create a frequency budget plan for D and J. So our solution is we're going to take their monthly cash flow budget and create a frequency chart to determine annual expenses, because not only is it good to have a budget for micro situations, month to month, week to week, things like that, but it's also really good once we start getting into our analysis here of determining things that we can expect throughout an entire year and start to have yearly financial goals additionally with any other goals that we have in mind. So I want to make a note that this doesn't have to be electronic. This can be done by hand, which is totally fine. But since we have technology at our disposal, we're doing distance learning. I'm, creating this video using my computer. Y'all have computers at home or something like that. I'm going to show you the electronic way, but it can be done by hand as well, because essentially it's just a list. But electronic things make it nice and easy for all of us. So In our frequency budget plan, we're going to have to divide up the expenses by how often they occur. So if you remember back from example 1, there were non-monthly expenses that Dave and Joan had, like they had their medical and dental expense, which I think was twice a year. Taxes were definitely twice a year, things like that. So we're going to need to divide them up by how often they occur, not just per week. And we will have the following categories. So after tax income, which is just, primary income, secondary income, additional income, right? Their weekly expenses, because I'm talking about how often they occur. So I want to know how many expenses do they have week to week? Also, how many expenses do they have month to month? Other frequency expenses. So this might be quarterly, semi-annually, things like that. And we're going to need the expense amount. So we still have to have that. That's the same carryover from the last cash flow budget that we had in their own column. And then we're going to need the frequency of how often this is made so that we can kind of tally them up very quickly. So I'll show you that in a minute, what I mean. Lastly, we're going to need a column specifically devoted to annual amounts so that we can add them all up, see how much money we're spending in a year, compare perhaps our annual gross salary to that, and see if we have any excess wiggle room. Can we add more to savings? Can I add this towards a particular goal or whatever? Or am I kind of cutting it a little close or perhaps spending more than my means? At the bottom of this spreadsheet, and I'm going to show you it in a minute, we're going to determine the total expenses by adding them up using a formula. And then the annual surplus or deficit, which really is just going to tell us, do we have extra money left over at the end of the year depending on our salary? Or are we spending too much money? And that's where the budget really comes in, because you get to determine, well, if I have this extra money, on one hand, what can I do with it? Now I have a little bit of freedom and figure out, well, where do I want this to go towards? Maybe I want it to go towards my vacation fund because that's a little bit more fun for me. Or perhaps you're like, you know what, I really could be eating better. Perhaps I'm going to use that towards my grocery bill so that I can buy, perhaps organic or more fresh fruit and vegetables instead of frozen, which are typically cheaper, something like that. Also, like if you're spending way more, then it's an eye opener and you have to figure out, well, I need to pull back somewhere. Why am I spending so much? I'm just not even really paying attention to what I'm doing, which is where a lot of people get into trouble. Maybe they're spending too much on their credit card debt because it's so easy to do so. So really, this is what this is helpful for. Do we have a surplus or deficit? So basically, when we have a frequency budget plan, the whole purpose of it is that expenses occur at different times over the year, kind of like when we were charting their budget initially. So this helps us determine how much cash flow we have at the end of the year and also refine our budget from year to year. So this year's budget can look completely different than next year, and you might change your yearly budget goals. That's just a really nice visual of where things are happening. So, with all that being said, this is what our frequency budget plan looks like. But I'm actually going to pause this really quick and open up example 3. So this is the frequency budget plan like I was talking about. Here's our category, after tax income. Our weekly expenses are here as well. Monthly expenses, and then other frequency expenses, right? Then we have our totals. Additionally, this column is still the income amount. So we still have values for income of like, okay, so they're making 2,800, 500 here, so on and so forth, and the expense amounts are still here. So we still have the amount, but the frequency, instead of just writing one single amount of how much that they have, it tells us, like, obviously they get paid 24 times a year, which would mean that they're paid bi-monthly. So 28 times 24, that gives us their total gross income after tax of $67,200. So we have a category, a column for categories, a category for amounts, a category for frequency, and then we have how much that is over the entire year, the total amount for these things. Again, and at the bottom, you have total income, which you're using a formula. So if I click this button right here, you'll see that over here, it says the sum of D3 to D7. And as I click on it, you can see our line here that says the sum, right? And we just click enter. So that tells us that that's how much we have coming in. Weekly expenses, they're paying $185 on food, and there's 52 weeks in a year. So everything in this column is going to have 52 for the frequency because that's how many weeks are in a year. They pay $37 for personal transportation. They don't use public transportation. They don't have household or childcare fees. Dining out, $35 every week. Entertainment, $46, so on and so forth. Again, you don't have to have a number here, but if I was going to figure out the weekly expenses, I'd have to have something over here. So something I want you guys to know is that we're kind of working across in our spreadsheet here as this times this gives me this amount, right? You could check it. 2,800 times 24 does equal $67,200. Oh, but look, they also make $500 12 times a year. They get paid monthly at that side job gig. Remember? So we also have to set up our formula so that our income, I write equals this value times this value gives me that number. And notice, since I already had this value set up here, this number changed instantly too. Check it out. 67,200 initially, once I add in that second one, because I used a formula, this automatically changed. That's why using formulas is super, super important. And you never know, from year to year, people might have other strands of income coming in. So making sure we're using a formula is really, really important. So across all of these, we're going to say this is equal to this value times this value, enter, equals this value times this value equals, and so on and so forth. You would finish that, and then your total weekly expenses is going to be the sum of all of these. Here, here. Close it, enter. And as you would add in other values here, your weekly expenses is going to change. So I'm going to leave some of these empty for you because I'm actually going to have you do that as part of your assignment today. But eventually you get all of your total other frequency expenses. So actually that's what we've just done there. This will equal the sum of this entire column here. But then you have to come up with the total of your expenses and then determine the surplus or deficit. Let me go back to our PowerPoint here. So overall, this is what we have, right? I've left some blanks there on purpose. So the annual amount, kind of like what I just went over, to figure out an annual amount, you're going to multiply each column by its frequency, and you're going to want to use the formula in the cell. So that's what I was saying kind of work. 2,800 times 24 equals this, working through the columns or the rows. To figure out the total incomes, right? Your total income, your total weekly expense, your total monthly expense, your total other frequency expenses, to determine your totals, you're going to have to use the formula where we're adding them up in the column, right? So our starting value to our finishing value, that's where we're kind of making that rectangular thing. So for example, you could do D3 to D7. That would be this value right here. To figure out your totals. And you'll have to do that for each category: income, weekly expenses, monthly expenses, other frequency expenses. Lastly, there's your total expenses down here. To calculate this, you're going to need to add up all of the total expenses for each category. So you're going to add up, and it's just for expenses. So you're going to add up this one, whatever this number is, plus this value, but you're going to use the formula and make sure you're entering in not the number, but rather highlighting that cell so that you're still using a formula. So if things are to change, this number will automatically change as well. So you're going to be given access to this frequency budget plan, and you're going to need to fill in the annual amount column totals and determine whether we have a surplus or deficit. So you have to figure out, I'm not going to tell you, how do you determine if you have a surplus or deficit? Use a little bit of critical thinking and see, do you have more money coming in, or are you spending more? That's essentially surplus versus deficit. But reflecting on this allows you to see how you're spending your money and how frequently. And just looking at this chart, again, I'm going to pull it back up. Just looking at this gives you a really good idea of like, holy crap, I'm spending $9,000 in food like per year. You might be able to use this to analyze and determine where you can change things. So the next year, perhaps you change your food to even less. Maybe you change it to, let me just do it right now. What if you change it to 180? That saved you like $300. Yeah, that saved you a lot of money. So you can see how this is a really helpful tool for you to see how much you're spending in the macro lens over the long term. Let's get into example 4. Okay. So example 4 is expanding upon this a little bit and giving us another snapshot view. So example 4 says construct an annual expense budget spreadsheet using Dave and Jones cash flow data. So again, we're still using the same situation with Dave and Jones, still have all of their lists of expenses that they have. But the goal of this problem is to construct an annual expense budget. So looking at it in a more macro view. So something you can kind of think about is day 1, we did micro. We looked at specifically week to week, month to month. Now we're taking a larger lens, expanding our lens and thinking about financial goals in terms of the long run, in terms of yearly expenses and budgets. So we're going to expand upon example 1 spreadsheet essentially to create a year-long expense budget spreadsheet. So we're not going to go back to the one we just made, not the frequency, but as a matter of fact, the initial spreadsheet that we had for example 1. So we're still going to have the same categories, but instead of a non-monthly expense, we're going to have to determine if these are variable expenses or if they're fixed. So for example, I'm going to show that in a minute, but from example 1, in our non-monthly expenses, we had the first thing is medical and dental. Is this a variable expense or is this fixed? Right? You'd have to make that decision. Additionally, auto-related. If something's auto-related, is that a fixed value? Every year you're still going to spend $700 in terms of auto-related things that you need for your car? No, that's more of a variable expense. So you have to go through that list and determine where they fit best. Where's the best area that makes sense to categorize this data? Additionally, we're going to have to account for each month with their own columns because it wants an annual expense budget sheet. So this is where we're expanding. Before we just had it in a monthly or weekly term. Now we want to see over the entire year. So here's example 1. This is what it looked like, right? This is what I mean, where we had our income. Let me change this to my laser pointer. We had our income, right? That's going to stay the same. We have our fixed expenses like our mortgage, car payment, health insurance, life insurance, all the insurances, TV. And then the variable was like groceries, dining out, cell phone. I would argue that that's more of a fixed expense, at least for me, the plan that I have, dependent upon the plan that you have, I suppose. Electricity, water, sewer, sanitation, all of those things change from month to month, but we kind of capped it out and said like, okay, this is our max budget, or this is the maximum we've ever spent. But like I was saying, we're going to have to decide where these go. Medical and dental, Where do you think that goes? Auto-related, variable, home-related. Where do you think these values are going to go within a fixed expense or a variable expense? So our example 4, annual expense budget spreadsheet. Annual expense budget spreadsheet. Have a hard time talking. It's going to look something like this. So we haven't dived into the spreadsheet yet. I will in just a moment, but I wanted to show this side-by-side comparison, right? It still has income with all of that stuff. It still has fixed expenses. Just add in a few more of these. Still has variable expenses, which got larger because a lot of these are variable expenses, right? For example, taxes is not variable. That is definitely fixed. Tuition, fixed, right? Everything else, kind of variable. So put everything there. And then we had to create columns for every single month because I want to track these expenses month to month. Like we saw, I think in section 11.3, actually, when we were talking about charting budgets, is we kind of created something similar to this where you could visually see, remember the checkoff list or the value list, where you could see what months you're spending more money. This is kind of the same idea, expanding upon that, but a little bit more detailed. Exactly spread out with what your expenses are and your income instead of kind of just saying like, oh, well, I think I have this value here. Okay, so this is what it's going to look like. You can see the comparison, right? We still have our total, our running totals. Well, just for here, for our income. Income doesn't change, but everything else, we've got some good stuff going on. So let me bring it over to that spreadsheet right now. Okay, so here again I wasn't sure if we would be able to see that very nicely. Here was our example 1. This is what we're expanding upon. We just moved these expenses and had to determine, are they fixed or are they variable? And then side-by-side comparison, this is the annual expense budget plan. So we still have our income, it remains the same. They make $5,600 together every month, $500 on the side, $6,100 total. Now notice when I click here, it's not the number, it's actually using a formula. That's what makes spreadsheets so nice, is we have formula. All of them are formulas. Then we have our rent, $2,400 a month. Right? That doesn't change. That's a fixed expense. Your car loan doesn't change. Your education loan doesn't change. All of your loan values are not going to change. You agreed upon that amount when you went in and accepted the loan. Your premiums are not going to change for any type of insurance. Similarly, your cable provider has a flat fee, right? Life insurance, flat fee. Tuition doesn't change unless you have a tuition increase. And taxes. Then we have all of our values here, how much we're spending on groceries. You can see that we're spending the same amount every month, dining out, all of this. And here's what I'm talking about, variable expenses. So if you remember, they don't have sewer or sanitation expenses for renting their home for Dave and Joan. They also don't pay for medical separately because they pay it in a premium, medical and dental. So they pay that once a year. This is able to show us like auto related. They determined that that was going to be when October, right? So we can kind of start to see how this is related to what we did last section. We can see that they pay for home related expenses twice a year, not quite like semi-annually, not every 6 months, but they pay for it twice a year. That's a variable expense. They take a vacation once a year in July. They, have gifts, contribution. So this lays out a really nice value that we can see. And you guys are actually, I think, also going to be manipulating this a tad bit in your homework. So here it is kind of fuzzy. I wanted to make sure we went and showed all of that. This lays out the expenses and income by month, so you can see it really nicely. Great visual snapshot to see your financial expectations, your obligations on every month. And you can use this as the year progresses or as needed. So the whole purpose of creating these charts or these budgets is to be able to manipulate them and change them as you need. Remember, budgets are personalized, so it totally depends on what you need financially, what your goals are financially, and those are personal. So not everyone's is going to look the same. So, what you could and should do, actually, and this is what I'm going to ask you to do, is to create a monthly row at the very bottom. So, add in a new row down here that gives you the totals. Like, add up every expense in January and add up every expense in February and March and April and all of that. So, you can see how much you're spending every single month. Because this kind of lays out basically throughout the year what most of your expenses are going to be. Right? The most essential expenses that you have. And then you want to compare that to how much money you're making. So I'm going to ask you to create a monthly total row on the bottom to see how much you have month to month. Um, and so this kind of allows you to inadvertently do a cash flow analysis. Like, hey, what if one month you spent $7,000, but your income is only $6,100? You better have a savings in place so that you can cover that, or know that your credit card expenses are going to go up that month. So the next month you're going to have to pay off more in that, and perhaps the next month you only spent like $5,000. Then you have, an extra $1,100 to pay off towards that credit card debt or whatever in months that you're going over. And this is really super detailed and really, really great skill to start doing now while your expenses are small. Because as you get older, perhaps you start your own business, calculating and keeping track of all of these things can be really, really tedious. But if you start that foundation right now, it will become second nature. And then you'll be able to make more sound financial decisions and instead of kind of ballparking where your financial status is. Um, so like it kind of falls around this theme of like knowledge is power as long as you keep your accurate records. Um, you would want to use this in conjunction with a cash flow analysis because you're kind of starting to do your cash flow analysis here, because this allows you to reevaluate your financial situation and make changes as necessary. I say that a lot for this specific section of the text, just because, like I said, it's personal. So if you're not meeting your goals, what can you do? Where can you pull back somewhere so that you will reach your financial goals? And vice versa. Say you are meeting them. Okay, how can I go further? Can I create a new goal? Or perhaps, what, I really should start paying off more of my debt. So let me start paying off more than my minimum amount for my student loans. Or perhaps I'm going to pay off those credit cards. Give yourself a goal of, within the next 3 months, I'm going to pay off all of my credit card debt and have a zero balance month to month. Those are the different kind of financial decisions that you can make personally, but you're not going to be able to make sound decisions unless you have an idea of where your money's going. So again, the essential question when we began this was like, why is it important to know where your money is coming and going? So you can get a better idea, and so you can plan better, and you can start to formulate plans and achieve goals, and feel really satisfied in that process while doing it. So since we've talked about that, it makes sense that once we're, getting a gain on our finances, it would make sense that we'd want to talk about our net worth. As things progress, you're making more money, you're becoming more successful, you're making decisions that work best for you. It might be wise to determine net worth. Now, those of you that filled out your FAFSA, you'll notice that they asked questions like this about, since you're minors, your parents or guardians, and their net worth, because they're kind of taking an assessment of, is somebody who's financially technically responsible for you in the eyes of the law um, able to provide for this student in determining your financial aid status. So they ask questions about net worth in there that kind of probably didn't make sense to you at the time, but they're really just evaluating like, where are you financially? Can you afford to pay for tuition? And should this money go to someone more in need? So it makes sense after we're starting to build these plans that we would want to determine, well, how well are we doing? What is my net worth? So we're going to talk about that very briefly here. So budgeting helps us determine and manage our money and find balance. So it makes no sense. It makes complete sense, sorry, that you would want to ask yourself, well, where do I stand financially today? Where was I standing financially last year? Where, and start to extend that and think about where could I be in the future as you start to envision financial success. And it could be totally different from person to person. So to determine this, you're going to calculate net worth with this, which is actually a super simple calculation. It's nothing crazy, really, but you hear about net worth all the time, and it's kind of like this ambiguous thing where you're kind of like, oh yeah, that's like how much they're worth. And that's how, especially in today's age, we start to measure celebrity success. We're like, oh, like a big thing in the news recently was like Adele's net worth. I think she was, oh, I don't want to get it wrong. Maybe I should Google it really quick. That's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to Google it. But she just split up from her husband. They weren't married for very long, but at least like a handful of years, right? And in their divorce, he was coming for her for like all of her money. It was crazy. So Adele's net worth is 150 million. And I guess this article says she's the richest UK musician. And then her husband was trying to get, oh gosh, just tell me the number. Her husband, so if she's 150 million, her husband was trying to get like 130 million in alimony. And I'm like, what? Since when? She wrote one album about you, sir. Like, since when did you leave her with 20 million extra? Like, you don't have the pipes. Like, what? But calculating net worth, determining how much she's worth, how much she's accrued, how successful she is, and comparing her to her peers, her other UK singers, is actually pretty simple. So it's the difference between your assets and your liabilities. And you're probably like, well, what's an asset? It's the things that you own. What do you own? What do you take ownership of? And that might be like a home, your vehicles, so many other, like a boat, perhaps. And a liability is what you owe money on. So you want to do the difference between like how much things do you own, which are worth something, some sort of numerical value, and how much do you owe, and your net worth is the difference between those two and evaluates how much you have or lack of um, in determining your financial status. So the result can be a positive number, or if you're not in a good space, it could be negative. The goal is to be having a positive network, just like the goal for the cash flow analysis was to have a positive cash flow. We want to have a positive net worth versus negative net worth. And that's really what they're looking at for you guys specifically in financial aid. Those of you that have a negative number or zero out as far as net worth, you are a higher need of financial aid to go to college, right? But those people with a positive net worth and in fact, a high positive net worth, they don't need the government's assistance in terms of the law. So, pro tip is you should calculate your net worth at regular intervals in order to determine if there are any changes to your financial status. So it's really important that just like you're going to budget at regular intervals and evaluate that budget and make changes whenever necessary, you would want to do the same with your net worth, especially if that's a financial goal of yours. Going from negative into the positive or growing your net worth is a financial goal of yours in order to make the changes necessary. So here's an image of the top 10 richest people in the world. Jeff Bezos, this guy, this is from India TV. It's an article. This was updated in February. Homeboy is worth way more than $140 billion because I forget, it was just in the news the other day that he acquired something else and is like worth so much money. And then even further, you could see Mark Zuckerberg's down here, 84 billion. Mark Zuckerberg literally just bought out Giphy, um, the digital GIF website on the internet for like 160 million. And there's a running joke that they saw that Bezos was had acquired this, and Mark Zuckerberg was like, not not on my terms, and so he bought that really successful company to help him out in elevating and getting closer to closing that gap with this guy who is the owner and founder of Amazon. I don't know what this means, Bernard Arnault. I'm not familiar with this company, but obviously Bill Gates with Microsoft, Warren Buffett with Berkshire Hathaway, which I'm pretty sure is a legal firm, Zuckerberg with Facebook, this guy for Zara, which is an online clothing company or like an e-commerce company. Kind of like, it's like a really good bridge between, as far as I know, of like designer and casual clothing, but not necessarily with the giant designer price tag. I could be so wrong on that. Google, Reliance, and then I'm actually going to link a video to show you the history of the richest billionaires in the world. It's from like 1997 to 2019, so it's not quite updated with today's data values. But you will see how these people eventually grew in their net worth over time. So this is literally just a bar graph of their net worth, and you'll see how they fluctuate. And I thought it was really interesting also to see that success is not linear. You'll see Jeff Bezos in this video. He's not even present, well, because internet wasn't a thing, and then Amazon certainly wasn't a thing for a large portion of the video. And then he's down at the bottom, and then he drops off a bunch, and then he goes up, and then he drops off. And so you'll be able to see that like success isn't always linear, but he obviously had financial goals in place, and also business goals for his business that eventually led him being to the richest person in the entire world. Like ever. So, example 5. Super simple, talking about net worth. Liam Brown is single in his mid-20s and he owns a condo in San Diego. He calculated the following assets and liabilities. Calculate Liam's net worth. Last year, he was at $205,780, and I want to compare it and see what this means. So, our goal is to calculate his net worth. So, we have to first look at the assets and liabilities and then, take the difference of them to determine net worth. That's all that really is. Nothing crazy here. So, here's a list of Liam's assets. His value of his condo is $580,000. Something important to note when you are calculating net worth is it has to be current value. So, something that can change is value of a home, value of a car, things like that. Things are going to fluctuate and go up and down. That's very, very important when calculating net worth. The value of the car, per Kelley Blue Book, that's what KBB stands for, $17,000. The amount he has in his checking account is $980. Again, that is something that can change when you reevaluate your status from year to year. You might have more in your checking account, you might have less. Combined balance in all savings accounts, $22,500. Current balance in retirement. So this guy is doing great. He obviously set up either a 401k or an IRA. He has $24,800 in his mid 20s, so 25, 26, maybe somewhere in there. He's already got $24,000 set aside for when he's retiring. So you guys, remember when we talked about retirement? Start saving now. Current value of his computer is $2,900, so obviously he has a Mac or something. He has a collector bass guitar, $6,700. That's something that he owns, right? And it has a value to it. He's also smart. He invested in stocks and bonds. He has $18,300 there. And then things that he still owes money on, his liabilities. He still owes $380,000 on his mortgage for his condo mortgage. So he's paid off a bunch of it, but he still has a lot to go. He has student loans. So he has $51,000 in student loans, and credit card debt is $1,600 at this moment in time. So to determine net worth, we have to have the sum of the assets. So you're literally just going to add up every single number: $5,800, $1,700, $980, $22,500, $24,800, $2,900, $6,700, $18,300. And if you add them all up, you end up getting $673.80. Then we're going to have to do the exact same thing with his liabilities, which is much less, less things to add up. So that's going to be the remaining balance of his mortgage, plus the student loans, plus his credit card debt, and it leaves him with $432,000, 600 $432,600 in debt. So he has this much money in assets. He has this much money in debt. To calculate our net worth, it's assets minus liabilities. This leaves him with $240,580 as his net worth. So his net worth is close to 240. I was going to estimate, but no, $240,580, which is pretty good for a guy in his mid-20s. I mean, but notice that his financial decision to purchase a condo really increased his net worth. And comparing from last year he was at $205,780. So he has increased his net worth in by $34,000, almost $35,000 from last year. From various different things. There's so many different things you could extrapolate. Perhaps he did work on his condo, so the value of his home increased. Perhaps he paid off a lot of liabilities and has less credit card debt, paid off a lot of student loans. Perhaps he acquired, that valuable bass guitar, things like that. So those are ways he increased his net worth, and he's improving financially. He made financial decisions that improved his overall status. So, like I said, like paying off that credit card debt, that's a smart financial move. Paying off your debts was one of those things that I said in the PSA that's like really, really important when you're speaking of finance, because they add up and they have interest, y'all. They have compound interest at that too. So, debt reduction planning. When we first talked about this unit as well, we talked about, increasing savings, decreasing debt. So one of the things you can do is create a debt reduction plan. Just formulate a plan to make sure you decrease those debts. So this is going to require you to be honest about your net worth and honest about your debt and have an accurate reading at all times. Otherwise, it's not really doing you a favor. So what you would do is calculate your personal debt to income ratio, which is debt over income. Right? It's called a debt to income ratio. We don't, like I said in math, I always tell you guys in math, we don't get crazy with names. And when we represent this as a percent, and that also helps you analyze your financial situation. I think we talked about something similar to this when we were discussing purchasing a home. So this is what's recommended by experts. If you have a debt to income ratio of 15% or less, you're in great standing. That means you really have a hold of your finances. You're only 15% of your total income in debt. And that's very, very manageable in a way for you to continue to minimize that debt and increase your savings. Now, if you have a ratio of 20% or higher, that is a major red flag to you that you need to put a debt reduction plan in place. You need to go back and you need to budget and figure out how you can reduce that debt in your life, because you are not doing yourself a service. You are digging yourself deeper and deeper and deeper into the hole, and you're going to end up in a year or two, not even a lot of time, that it's very, very hard to get yourself out, and you're going to have to make a lot of sacrifices. So no bueno. Additionally, you can find this advice literally anywhere. Hello, it's 2020. We have the internet. You can read books about it. You can watch videos online. So many different things that you can do in order to reduce your planning. But the main suggestions that you should have at least some, if not all of these, in your plan to reduce your debt is number one, lower your debts with the highest interest rates. So, say you have a car loan and it's at, I don't know, some heinous like 12% interest. That's disgusting. First of all, uh, refinance or look at your credit score. Has it increased since you got that loan? You need to go back to that lender and be like, hey, can we work a deal here? Because this is ridiculous. Or just start paying that off right away. Lower your debts with the highest interest rates. Credit cards typically have very high interest rates and they're more manageable than a car loan, right? Like I was telling you when we talked about credit card interest rates are typically in the 20% range, 25% to 27% on average for opening an account. So lower those debts right away. Pay more than the minimum whenever possible. So if you're paying off those credit cards with those high interest rates and you realize that your balance is $150, but the minimum is 27 and you got money, pay off that balance. Or instead of paying, $27 a month, pay 50 if that's all you can afford. But the only way you're going to know if you can afford it is if you make a budget plan, if you plan and take a real honest look at your income versus your financial obligations. Look for ways to cut costs daily. So when you're out at the store, and you're looking around and you're driving past that Starbucks, think to yourself, do I really need coffee or can I brew myself one at home with things I've already paid for? That's something I personally struggle with a little bit. I've gotten better since quarantine, but look for a way to cut costs daily. Think about, is there a cheaper alternative? Is there something that I have already that I could use that for? Things like that. Use an online debt management calculator. There's so many calculators out there. I've had you guys working with them basically since we've done distance learning, but use that to your advantage. Face your debt. It is so important to just be honest and real with yourself and be like, hey man, this is what I've got going on, and coming up with a solution to figuring that out. So in order to keep it at the forefront of your mind, it's suggested that you make a list of what you owe and keep it handy whenever you need a reminder. So perhaps you make that list and you put it in your wallet. And the next time that you go and you want to put something on your credit card, it's right in that wallet. So you can be like, you know what? I have so much debt that I actually have to pay off first before I realize that this is something that I just want and it's not a need. And slow down and or eliminate credit card spending. They'll get you every time. Like I said, they are in an industry of specifically making money off of you. That is the goal. That's why there are interest rates. That's why credit cards exist, not only to elevate our living status, but that is so tricky and such a slippery slope. So either stop spending money on that credit card or completely or just slow down, which is why having that list in your wallet might be a really good idea. So the last example I have is just talking about a debt to income ratio. So you can kind of start to make stipulations about this guy's status. So this is a very fancy spelling of Tom. So Tom's monthly liabilities and assets are shown in the table. Find his debt to income ratio as a percent. So that's our goal. Debt to income ratio, which is debt over income. Okay. What we have to do is we have to find the sum of his assets and the sum of his liabilities and then figure out his debt to income ratio and convert it into a percentage. So let's add up his assets, which you can see over here on the right hand side of his table here. So and if I actually had this table electronically, we could use a spreadsheet to calculate it for us. But it's not hard. It's just basic math, arithmetic. $7,800 plus $380 plus 120 is $8,300. So that's his assets. Then we have to figure out, well, how much does he owe? What is his debt? So add up all of these things in this column. $2,300 plus $750 plus 200 plus 150 is $3,400 in liabilities. His debt to income ratio. Notice also that his income included his salary, stocks, and any interest that he's accruing from savings bonds or savings accounts. So that's good interest, not credit card interest. So again, debt to income is debt over income, debt over pre-tax income. So 3,400 divided by 83 is about 0.409, and then we want it as a percent, so we multiply that by 100 or move the decimal over 2 places, and we get 40.9%. So Tom's debt to income ratio is 40%, and it is way too high. Way too high. So this Tom would need to go back and come up with a debt reduction plan because he's only making $7,800 in income. Like maybe he needs to get a full-time job. Right? Or I don't know if this is month to month or what it happens to be, but maybe he can find a better paying job or go for that promotion. Perhaps he can pay off his credit cards so that his minimum is not $200. Like, first of all, why is his income $200? That's ridiculous. Um, you know, do some work to increase his credit score, things like that. Take more of an in-depth look at how he's spending his money and manage his money in a better way because 40% is way too high. If this guy tried to go and purchase a home or a second home because he already has one with this mortgage payment, he probably would be denied. That's way too high. And that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you learned a ton. And I hope you had this week, actually yesterday, you guys walked with your virtual ceremony. I can't wait to see the video. I'm so excited for you guys and so happy for you all. And I hope you're having an awesome week. We're almost done. Stay the course. And I hope you're learning a lot about taking control of finances, which is going to be so helpful um, once you guys get out there and have more finances of your own. Alrighty, check you guys later. Have a great day. Bye.